Welcome to Southern Discomfort. This is one of the most unique podcasts on the internet. Southern tales of the weird, wild, mysterious, unusual, voodoo, cryptids, hauntings. Are you intrigued yet? This is Southern Discomfort. Southern Discomfort. And now, your hosts, April and Christine.
Hey everybody.
What's up?
We didn't leave, I promise. We didn't ghost everybody.
We kind of did.
We didn't mean to though. We took a little bit longer break than we normally do, but we're back after a little bit of technical difficulty. Here we are.
And happy Mardi Gras or Tuesday if you don't live in New Orleans.
Yeah, and happy New Year because we've been back since then. But we've got a good one for you tonight. This one kind of twists and turns, but it is good. It's just buckle up, I guess. So this one it takes place in, well, all over, but really mainly in the Opelousas, Louisiana area. And in honor of that, we for our drink du jour, we have a Raging Cajuns IPA. It is it's from Bayou Teche Brewing, and can't ever say that word. Bayou Teche Brewing.
Brewery.
Yes, there you go. in Arnaudville, Louisiana, which is nearby.
That word is hard.
It's like, I don't know, it's really not to some people, but that one gets me every time. So this one it's light and not one of my favorites. You'd think I'd like it on paper. It kind of makes sense. You'd think I'd like it. It's a little bit too bitter for me, even though the IBU is only 12. But it has I'll just read the description. It's a flavorful, light body, dry, crisp, and snappy craft ale. And it's and because of all that, I think I would like it, but I didn't. It's a Kölsch style ale, brewed with barley, rice, and multiple additions of German-grown noble hops. You definitely wouldn't like it, but I thought I might. But the interesting thing is it is made with Louisiana rice, so I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. So, like I said, we'll just get right into it since we made everybody wait long enough, okay? Tonight we're going to talk about the kidnapping of Bobby Dunbar. And it's basically, I got most of the information from a book written by the granddaughter of Bobby Dunbar called A Case for Solomon. It's Bobby Dunbar, The Kidnapping That Haunted a Nation. So Margaret Dunbar Cutright and Tal McThenia. And this one, like I said, buckle up because this is a good one.
Yeah, we just did the math, so it's 108 years ago.
It is. This is a story that takes place 108 years ago in 1912. I almost said 2012, but 1912. But also, highly recommend reading the book. It's definitely, if you really want to take a deep dive into it, it's definitely worth it. And then also, This American Life did an audio. So if you don't have time to sit down and read, they did an audio with a lot of great interviews with the family. And then that way you can really get into like the just the personal side of things. Because when I called you, we were ready to go. And I found this. And I said, holy shit, we really need to include this because this is great, really good stuff.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
It's definitely worth putting it off a little bit longer to absorb all of that, as it were.
Yeah, so take a listen to that. But we'll just get right into it. So Robert Clarence Bobby Dunbar was the firstborn son of Leslie and Percy Dunbar in 1908 in Opelousas, Louisiana. So he had a brother who was 2 years younger. His name was Alonzo. And when Bobby was 18 months old, he walked through some red-hot ashes, and this left a disfiguring scar on his big toe. And then also there was an incident where he had run into a sewing machine and left a scar above his right eye. And just an interesting note, Percy, his dad, he had an accident when he was younger, and this involved shooting and firearms, and left him with his left leg, with a cork leg. He was like an amputee. So he had a cork leg, and then he would do this funny parlor trick where he would, when people didn't know, he would take a knife and stab his cork leg. People would just like recoil in horror. You can imagine, like, that's kind of weird, though. Somebody take a knife and just, like, stab your leg. Be like, what? So, yeah.
Parlor trick. That's a neat parlor trick.
Yeah, that was before the internet and YouTube, though. Before they had YouTube challenges. So Percy was a member of the local Democratic Party, and he was also on the city's primary board of supervisors. So he was very prominent in the Opelousas area. So, in August of 1912, the family took a trip to a cabin in Swayze Lake. This is it's very close to Opelousas. And one thing I did do is I Googled this to the Google Earth, which is pretty amazing. And it's very primitive.
Well, it's actually a swamp.
Yes, very swampy. Very
Lake's
swampy.
a little misleading.
Right. And you know what it is? It reminds me of an oxbow lake, which it's also not far from the oxbow near us, which is, well, I guess us, me, which is False River. Mm-hmm. Although this one doesn't have a bend like an oxbow, it's just part of, it was a remnant of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
So now, like you said, it's very dense. It's very thick with vegetation, and it's swampy. But then, at that time, that was something that families did, though. They could take a day trip because this was on the railroad. It was a pit stop on the railroad. And they even advertised it as, come take a day trip. You know, go to Swayze Lake. You can take the rail. It'll be fun. That's it. Kids, alligators.
It'll be fun, they said.
Alligators and snakes and yeah, fun. Anyway, so the family was there with it was actually Leslie, the mom's. It was her uncle's cabin, and so their family was there: Percy, Leslie, Alonzo, Bobby, and then they also had other people there. Percy's cousin Wallace, his wife, 2 sons, and then Leslie's younger sister, Rowena Whitley, and a family friend named Paul Mitzi, and then what the book describes as a servant girl. So, they were there for a fish fry. Well, they were actually there to camp, but this particular day that we're going to talk about, they were having a fish fry, and they were getting everything ready. There was a lot going on. Like I said, there were 11 people there. And that day, Leslie recalled putting sandals on Bobby. That's significant. So a boy, he walks up, and he has a message for Percy. So there's a David Thornton that lives about a mile away, and he needed a deed notarized. So, little Bobby, he wanted to go with his dad. His dad was going to go ride by horse and go notarize this deed. But Bobby wanted to go. When he found out he couldn't go, he started throwing a crying fit. And in the middle of this crying fit, he has a straw hat on, and he's, I'm sure, arms flailing about and such, as little kids do. He snaps the chin strap under this hat. And so his dad didn't have time to even fix it, so he just kind of pushes it further on top of his head just to, like, hold it, which I could totally relate. Like, look, I don't have to.
Whatever works, man. Just make it work.
Right. So the strapping broke, and then he just kind of pushes it on his head. And off he goes to go notarize his deed. And then Paul Mitzi, that we had mentioned earlier, he's the family friend. He's 30. He loved Bobby. They had this friendship. He would take him horse riding, and he even had a lovingly cutesy nickname for him. He called him Heavy because he was kind of a little chunky little chunk him up.
A little on the heavy side.
Yeah, for as you are when you're 4. So, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. On that day, Mitzi was going. They were gonna go shoot garfish at the lake swamp because they kill other fish. So, you want to get rid of the gar. Have you ever seen those? They're like very menacing looking too.
Yeah, I've caught one before.
Yes. Well, I didn't catch one, but I was very close in proximity to somebody who did. It was just like, that thing looked like a monster. I thought it was an eel. And then I thought it was a shark.
Yeah, when I pulled it in, I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a menacing sea creature is what it looks like.
Yeah, it's worth a Google if you're not familiar with the garfish.
Yeah, and they also call it alligator gar. See, unless that's a different species. I don't know. I'm not that...
No, I'm pretty sure it's the same.
Alligator or gar. Alligator gar, yeah. They also make gar balls too. Like salmon balls, but they also make, we'll make anything down here. We'll cook it up. We'll get anything from wildlife and make it into a meal. Because who said that thing is ugly? Let's make some gar balls out of this.
You know what? I'm going to make some gar balls.
Yeah. This thing is disgusting. Let's, like it looks like a monster. Let's make some gar balls. Okay. I bet they taste great. We'll roll them up, deep fry them, and then they won't even be able to tell. Anyway. So, Bobby begged his mother to go shooting gar with Mitzi out at the, down to the lake. So it was the lake house, and then it was a short walk. Or it could have been a long walk, but it was a walk to the lake. So he begged her to, and she said, okay, that was fine. So she agreed to let him go. So Mitzi walks down to the lake, and along with Mitzi and Bobby, Alonzo, the 2-year-old, because I guess back in 1912, that was a great idea. Take your 2-year-old.
2-year-old.
Right. Just, yeah.
Shooting garfish.
But Mitzi was 30, so I'm sure they thought, okay, everything's going to be fine. It's fine. It'll be fine. One of Wallace's son went down with them. So it was a group of boys that went down there and they shooting the gar. So then they came back after they had been down there a while. And then Leslie sees the group of boys coming back, and she says she didn't see Bobby. She's like, where's Bobby? And that's when the group realized Bobby wasn't with them, and Mitzi starts yelling for Bobby, and at least Leslie's in a full panic. Like, she's like, where is he? And I guess I should point this out too, that it was reported that Bobby's last words were to Mitzi when he had warned Bobby to get out of the way. He said, get out of the way, Heavy, or I'll run you over. And Bobby said, you can't do it. You're no bigger than me. And so, yeah, how precious. Like, reportedly, those are his last words. So Leslie started panicking, like I said, and she's like calling out his name, looking everywhere. And then at that point, everybody that was there, they just start looking for Bobby. And they just start going down the wagon roads, the dirt roads, and then they run into Percy, who's coming back from the Thorntons. And they look around and they find footprints, but there's footprints in the mud everywhere because it's swampy. It's a big, swampy lake, alligator, snake-infested swamp. So they look for his hat, they look for his clothes, they look for anything. They couldn't find any of this. So then they came upon these bare footprints, and they took his sandals. Like I said, Leslie had put his sandals on earlier, and they held him up to these prints. And they decide, okay, these must be Bobby's because they fit. They follow the prints south along a wagon trail all the way down to a dead end, and came dead end to a T with the railroad tracks. And this is just a few yards west of a wooden trestle over the lake. This is a train trestle that goes over the lake. And then the footprints crossed over the railroad tracks. They dropped down an embankment to a sand pit on the other side. And they also said that they detected signs of a fall like on the way back up the embankment. And it was like where he had like tried to go up the embankment and then fall back down, which I thought, this is pretty fascinating. And then on the railroad tracks, the prints appeared again. And then they go for a little ways and they just disappear. Which is, which caused a lot of people to believe that maybe he was abducted by someone on a train. Like maybe, and this is something that I thought was kind of strange, but they thought that maybe someone had, I even saw where they thought maybe someone had scooped him up while the train was moving. Surely it was just going really slow. But is that even possible? I thought that was kind of crazy. So, and then so the search went on, and one thing they did was they dynamited the lake. And I thought, why did they do that? Like dynamite the lake, but that was to displace the water. And then I thought, oh, that's pretty brilliant. That's pretty smart for the day. You don't have a lot of the things and the tools that you do now. But they said, we'll just dynamite the lake. That will displace the water. We'll look and see if he's on the bottom. Of course, I'm sure they were thinking, well, he was already drowned at the time. And then they dragged the lake too. So I guess they did have hooks, though. Some of the things that they thought was they thought that he had been bitten by a poisonous snake or even a loggerhead turtle and maybe snapped his limb off, or he had slipped into the water, which sounds very likely. Very likely ended up in this lake.
I mean, just pick something in the swamp that could have gotten him.
Yeah, absolutely. Any of these things. Snake bite, turtle. The other thing they said that was pretty interesting to me was they thought maybe his blood was poisoned by mosquitoes, which was very likely. But yeah, right. And doesn't that conjure up like some sad little 4-year-old just bitten by mosquitoes?
It does, but that's also reaching a little bit, I think, in this instance. But I mean, they were just probably just thinking of in all scenarios, any possibility. Yeah.
But the main thing, they thought he was eaten by an alligator, which absolutely that's actually what I think. Maybe we can kind of get into that later, but. So they looked for alligators, they killed them, and then they would slice their stomach open just to, I don't know, how sad is that? Just to see if your boy is in there, that's gotta be just gut-wrenching. And then they thought they had found something when they found the white part of the belly of a deer that was bloated. And so it just, if you can imagine, just ups and downs already. I tried to search for Bobby. So, but by the time
searching in like that dense of an area, like it just seems like the odds are totally against you.
For sure. And just looking at the pictures on Google Earth, Google Maps, this is a pretty big, long lake. I can't even imagine that you even could feel like you searched all of it, but by the time that word got out, they had actually had about 500 men looking for him. So maybe with 500 men, they kind of thought they covered all the grounds. And then they're dynamiting, they're dragging the lake. So this was also interesting. They got a straw hat, just like the one that Bobby was wearing that his dad pushed down on his head. And they threw it in the water because they wanted to see how long it took to sink. And because they thought, well, are we, will we see it? Because they really did think he went in the water. And then the hat floated for hours. They're like, surely we would have seen the hat, if he went in the water with the hat. It wouldn't have sunk. For hours. So anyway, there was an award. At first, it was $1,000, and that's about $22,000 in purchasing power today. But then, as time went on, the sightings come in. These was sighted everywhere. They placed ads in the newspaper all over. And one thing like this turned into a nationwide, just everybody all over knew about this, and they were following it. Because this is before internet, this is before TV. This is before anything like that. That really they just had the newspapers, and
I did read that it was a nationwide, like everyone was on alert nationwide.
Yes, they were. Even the Black Hand was blamed, which I thought was interesting, and I wouldn't even have known what this was had I not even listened to a podcast episode not that long ago about the Black Hand. It's actually a secret society for Italian Americans. I almost said in America, but they had, because there was terrible sentiment toward Italian immigrants, and Louisiana was certainly no exception. But they even mentioned some octoroons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that, a throwback to our Storyville episode. But they were accused of being Italian, which was actually looked down upon worse than at that time in Louisiana. I thought that was interesting. Yeah. There were sightings in Letcher, Gulfport, Ohio, Atlanta, Lucedale, Osaka. They had a really strong lead from some guys in Macomb.
Wow.
On the rail, yeah. Then the reward was bumped up to about $5,000. So that's $6,000 total, and that's about $157,000 reward looking for him. So, and everybody was looking for him.
Oh, I'm sure.
They were looking. I mean, even as far away as Philadelphia, they were going door to door. I know everybody was looking for this boy from Louisiana. And then the Dunbars and Opelousas, they were prominent. This family was. So that was one thing. Like, they had means so they could use their influence to try to have people like look for this boy.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody was interested in trying to find him. But
money motivated.
Absolutely. And Leslie was spending so much time looking for Bobby that Alonzo was actually forgetting her, because when she had come back after a month or so, like, he would scream and cry when he saw her, and that was pretty sad. So she has, she's lost one boy, and now she has spending time away from her youngest son, who ended up, at least in the short term, actually forgetting about her. That just shows how much she was actually out there looking, how long she was away from him, Alonzo anyway. So in April 1913, there were many accounts of a man who was a piano tinker or repairer or tuner, and he was seen with a little boy about the size of Bobby, kind of roughly the description. And this is in Poplarville, Mississippi. And they all thought that this was weird. Like, what is this single guy? It just stood out. Mm-hmm. What is this single man doing with this 4-year-old in tow?
Where's his mama?
Right. That's exactly what they were saying. Like, where does he belong to? And who's his mom? So they found him. These women, they were really concerned because a group of them had noticed and witnessed him whip this little boy about 3 times. So they're like, what's going on here? Like, what's really going on here? So they know that the whole nation is looking for Bobby Dunbar, and they're like, this has got to be Bobby Dunbar. This weird man. He didn't have this little boy didn't have a mama, and he's like, this man's just whipping him. And so, like, what's really going on? So that man's name was William Walters, and he was actually arrested for kidnapping Bobby. The other thing was he had told several stories, because they're like, they questioning. They're like, what are you doing with this little boy? And he had different stories. He couldn't really hold on to the same story, and they're like, this is very suspicious. I guess back then they didn't need very much to arrest somebody.
Well, and he didn't do himself any favors by not being forthcoming about where he happened upon Bobby.
Right, yeah. So Percy found out. Bobby's dad found out, and he went to Mississippi to see the boy. And then there was a moment that he thought that the boy recognized him, but then he looked away. I thought that was pretty interesting. It's kind of, he looked up and he thought so. But in the condition that this boy was in, they described him as being dirty and like he was disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept. And then probably not, and I understand conditions were much tougher back then, but, if you're just being carted around by this piano tinker, you're probably, and you're going really from pillar to post, and because you're finding lodging, because that's what he would do, right? This Walters would tune the piano. Well, he would ask for lodging and food, and he really found out that if he had a boy with him, people would be more willing to open up their homes and allow them to stay with them and feed them. And, feel sorry for him. Plus, they would dote and ta-ta on the little boy.
And even give him a bath and, like, brush his hair and make sure that his clothes were tidy.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure I can picture it. The women, loved it. They're like, oh, little boy, we don't have a mama, so we'll take care of him. The motherly instincts. But back then, everybody was like that because the whole, it takes a village to raise a family, that was the whole thing. It's not like it is now, but so, and then in exchange for these things, Walters would tune their piano and called it tinker. I'm not sure. Did he play it? I'm not what is that? But it's just like do 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 do. Is that what it is? Yeah.
I've never heard that term.
When Leslie first saw him, Bobby was sleeping, and she was uncertain. She didn't know if this was her boy or not. And
see, but okay, I'm not a mother. I don't have any children of my own. You are. Yeah. Do you not know that that's your baby?
Right. And, okay, let's just point this out, even though I gave the time. It's 8 months. So it's only 8 months, which 8 months, that's probably a long 8 months for them because they didn't have their Bobby. I get that. I struggle with this. I go back and forth because, I don't know. I guess you would have to know maybe the conditions. Was he dark? Was it dark and she didn't want to wake him up? And... or does your heart want it to be so much so, and that be the case that this is your boy that they found, that you just throw everything else out the window and you're like, yeah, that's my boy. Yeah, that's him. So I wonder.
Yeah, I struggle with it too, but obviously there's a lot more to tell, but yeah. I just wonder, that because he could, it's true. It could have been the lighting. He could have lost weight. He could have been disheveled and, unrecognizable to her. I get that. I do.
Right.
But I feel like I would have run in that room, picked him up.
Woke him up, yeah.
And examined him from head to toe, smelled him. I would have, I feel like, but I don't know because I don't have young.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, me too. I feel like I wouldn't have just let him sleep. If I hadn't seen him in 8 months, I wouldn't just let him sleep. And then who knows? This, like we said, this account is 108 years old. I'm not saying that that's not exactly what happened, but there's a lot of things that I'm sure they're missing.
Yeah, surely there's gonna be things that are missing. I get that. I kind of wanted your perspective on that because when I first read it, I was like,
Yeah, well, that's just it. My knee-jerk reaction is, there's no way I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know any of my kids. I would just know them blindfolded, blind, and I say that, but I didn't live in 1912, 1913, I don't know the condition of the boy and things like that. Are we giving them too much? I don't know. And like I said, I think a lot of this is the mom just wanting it to be so much because you can convince yourself of things.
The mind sees what it wants to.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go back to that too.
Yeah, me too. And I really do feel like that's what it comes down to, and we can certainly get into more of that later. But so here's where it gets like just all over the place, right? Because the newspapers have contradicted accounts, and this is what Margaret, who wrote the book, she's the granddaughter of Bobby Dunbar. This is what she found out, and she was, of course, so frustrated that some newspaper accounts said that she did recognize him, and then some other ones said that she didn't. So it was just, that's what all she had to go by to write this book, and essentially is all what we have for the story. So they also said that Alonzo recognized Alonzo, and then someone said that he didn't, and so it just kind of goes back and forth with that. So you don't have anything concrete or evidence there.
So I read that he said, "Oh, I have a brother."
Yes, and then he also said at one point, he said, "I'm ready to see my brother Alonzo."
Yeah, that's what he said. He's like, "I would like to see my brother," and they were like, "Well, does he remember Alonzo, or did he hear people say he had a little brother?" Yeah,
and that's exactly what I thought too. He probably heard a lot of this going on. So, and then he also had recognized some sandals, and I think that's the other thing that kind of feeds into the whole thing. Like they just kind of held on to all these positive things that pointed in his direction, him being their son, because he had made a comment about the sandals. He said, "Oh, those are the sandals like the ones I had at home." So, but how many different
and
pairs?
He heard that the day of she put the sandals on him,
right. And then in 1912, 13, how many different pairs of sandals and styles would you have had to pick from in the Sears catalog or whatever it was? It probably wasn't even the catalog.
That's a good point.
Everybody was probably wearing the same sandals. I don't know, just maybe. But so here's the thing. So this is also murky, because remember earlier I said he had the scar on his toe and he had one on his eye, above his eye. So there are accounts that they recognize these scars and these moles. But then also they looked them over, and then like the newspaper account, some of them said that they didn't. He didn't have any scars from head to toe. So that's also very murky, and it's very just wishy-washy back and forth.
Well, see, the thing that I read said what you did about her going to see him when he's sleeping. And then she said she wasn't sure. Then the next day she had the opportunity to bathe him and said that she recognized that it was him because of his scars. But there again, that's one account.
Right.
There's others who, where it said she didn't recognize him.
Right, absolutely. I did see that as well. That's in the book. So, yeah. And then, this book does a really good job of like covering both accounts as well. So then sometimes you're like, well, wait a minute, did he have the scars, or did he not have the scars, or trying to sort all this out. I can't even imagine how she tried to
well, the whole story is baffling, all of it.
Absolutely. So then there was a parade. There's also I kind of found accounts of where this parade was, like. Was it in Columbia, Mississippi, or was it in Opelousas? But they had a parade.
Shrouded in mystery. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. He rode in the fire truck. I also saw an account or heard a report that they bought him a pony. I don't know about this. They had horses. He rode horses. Percy rode a horse to go sign the deeds, notarize the deeds. So they had horses. I don't think they actually purchased. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they're like, oh, here's a pony. But maybe they did actually. Maybe they only had horses and they went and bought him a pony. So that report, that was an episode I saw. They were trying to make something out of it. Like, oh, they had a parade for him and they bought him a pony. So, of course, he's going to say, this is my family. This is whatever. He's going to love it and want to live the life. But I don't think that was a big deal. Like, for him to be like, oh, this is where I am. This is my life. But okay,
well,
maybe.
all of the attention was all on him. All eyes were on him.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, and they had means, so yeah. But then also too, he had just been with this tinkerer, the piano tinkerer. So he's just like, wait a minute, I'm like going
This is way better than being with the tinkerer.
I'm going from house to house on this wagon. I'm dirty and I don't know where I'm going to get my next meal. And then it's like, oh, here's stable. As much as a 4-year-old knows stability. And then they're like, yeah, it's like fire trucks and ponies and, you know, all the great things that they have. Your own room, your own bed, you know, a brother. Woohoo. I don't know. We never had one, so
no, we don't know about
I don't
that.
know how great little brothers are. So. But shout out to all the little brothers. So, but
I kind of have one in my nephew. He was like a little brother.
That's true. That is true. A little bratty brother, but we love him. So, the newspapers were all over the story, following it, and that's what they were reporting. They were reporting that that they didn't believe that this boy was Bobby because they just kind of latched onto the first thing that they thought that Leslie said. In fact, they were outside of the house, so just anxiously awaiting, like, what is she gonna say? Is she gonna, you know, like, is this gonna be her boy? Is it not her boy? And so word had already gotten out that it wasn't, so they ran with that. And then even the Mississippi and Louisiana governors, they were involved because there was the whole extradition from the Walters guy. He, you know, there's Louisiana writing him the Mississippi governor at the time, and you know, you need to extradite Walters, get him back over here, and have a trial. And also there was pressure with the local law enforcement because I saw where Sheriff Day actually showed interest in wanting the reward money. So, of course, they were pushing from their angle, like, this is the boy, this is the boy. Like, this is just all over the place. Can you imagine? Like, this is just newspapers saying this, law enforcement saying that, and they're all wondering, like, what's the verdict? So, like I said, they had arrested Walter, so he's on charges, in jail on charges for kidnapping, and that's when he decides, and he'd already given all these stories about the little boy, which was so suspicious, but in jail when he's facing these kidnapping charges, that's when he decides, okay, here's the real
jig is up.
Here's the real story. Let me tell you what the real story is, okay?
Why didn't he tell that in the first place?
Yeah.
Anyway,
wasn't really clear, but I think he was still trying to. At first, I thought he was trying to save face from his because the story he told was that he said, "Okay, this is the truth." It's actually his brother, his late brother, and a lady had a boy out of wedlock, and
a love child,
right? And that he was taking the boy. He had taken the boy because his brother had passed away. So,
and we can't forget that the little boy was advantageous to his tinkering.
Right. So, yes. So, which is why he kept wavering on the story. And then he came claims like, okay. His mother is from Barnesville, North Carolina, and her name is Julia Anderson. So now we have another mother that's entered this story, okay? And so she made an official statement because word got back to her because, right, he's in jail, right? And he's like, I'm not going down. I'm not going down for these kidnapping charges. I'm going to bring, Julia Anderson in the picture. So she, word gets back to her. She makes an official statement. And so she says that is her child. Her name is Bruce Anderson, and that she only allowed Walters to take the son to visit his family for just a couple of days. He didn't know she was going to take him, actually, she said that he was in Walter's custody since February of 1912, which Bobby went missing August of 1912.
Right. It was a long time to have a little boy, that you were only supposed to take for a couple of days.
Right. And so she said that her son's eyes were blue, but she didn't have a picture. But she could identify him. She said for sure. But she stated that Walters had the boy, like I said, since February, and then this is certainly before Bobby went missing. But
okay, so how are you just okay with this dude having your little boy for that long though?
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. I don't think that she was okay with it. Because they described her as being, in fact, the newspapers were not kind to her. They described her as being a coarse woman with like dirty hands and bare feet, and worked as a sharecropper out in the field. And she could like living a hard life and was poor and didn't have any money, and so if that's the case, I have to imagine that if that was her condition, then that's all she could do was like work and just get enough money to scrape and live, and just get by, really. And not, she didn't.
There again, I submit. How are you not, going to the ends of the earth to find your child?
Well, okay. First of all, Christy, she was a woman. And we know women back in because they had only just been able to vote in 1914. So this is even before women could vote. Like they're like,
women weren't even full-fledged citizens yet. Okay, I got it.
Right. So
you're right.
Put that in perspective. Women were like men beat their women back then. I mean, I'll just say they don't now, but they certainly did. Like that was a way of life, and women can say anything about it. And if they did, they would just get beat down more. And that was the thing. Like they didn't get prosecuted for that. The charges weren't brought up against them.
Well, where was Mr. Anderson?
So when Walters confessed when he was in jail because he was facing the kidnapping charges, the story he told was that it was his brother's it was his brother and his mistress, their son, and that the father died and then the mom couldn't take care of him.
Yeah, you said that. That was my oversight.
It's okay. And we were also wondering about this too as well. So when Julia was 19, she married a man named Elijah. He was 27. So he was quite a bit older than her. And so the day after their wedding, the day after they took their nuptials, he shot her in the foot. So that didn't work out too well for her. 5 months later.
Didn't he shoot her on their wedding night?
It could have been. I saw it was the day after. So
okay,
it was like right around there. Either way, the honeymoon was definitely over.
Was she...
with your groom, it's not funny, but I mean, it is, but
I think that's a fair assessment.
When your groom shoots you in the foot, like, okay. And then back then they could, and that's what's so crazy about it. It's like back then they could do that and not be held accountable for it. You know what? Here, cheers, women, because we've come a long way. The story took place before we could even vote. So anyway. So she left him 5 months later. She was carrying a baby, and then it didn't survive. But the newspapers found out about this, and they also didn't take too kindly about her in the newspapers because they would write things like she lost her child. I mean, my gosh, she couldn't help it. I mean, they didn't even talk about how she got shot in the foot by her groom because, hello, it's probably men. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was that was writing the articles.
Oh, yeah. It had to have been.
Right. So I didn't know this was going to be a men bashing episode. It's not. But I mean, she wasn't legally separated or divorced from Elijah. So then she met a traveling shoe salesman. Ooh, say that 5 times fast. While she was actually waiting tables at this point. And she got pregnant with his child, and that was Charles Bruce Anderson.
Okay.
He wasn't in Bruce's life. I'm not even sure if he knew, but he wasn't in his life. But it is important to note, I'll note this, that Bruce didn't have any scars. He had blue eyes and he didn't have any scars. And the newspaper wrote that the boy identified as the Dunbars claim as the Dunbars claim as their son, he bears decided marks as a means of identification. So this is what I was kind of one of those, when I say it just goes back and forth, you know, the Dunbars claim that he has these scars and moles, and then you have Julie Anderson saying, okay, he has blue eyes and he doesn't have any scars.
So how could it be Bruce?
Right. It was also said that the Bobby's eyes were not the same, like, shape and or distance as Bruce. And one thing that came up a couple of times was, why didn't they, because they had flyer or the equivalent of flyers, but certainly pictures in the newspapers, but they never put them side to side, the pictures of Bruce and Bobby. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because I found pictures of Bobby.
Right. Yeah, and then but there is some in the book though. There is a side by side. They don't look anything alike.
Well, I couldn't imagine that they did. I think, anyway.
Yeah, and then Julia, even according to an affidavit, she said he has no marks of identification. That's why she said, I don't have a picture, and but I can identify him.
And it makes sense if she was poor. It sounds like she was dirt poor. She would not have been able to afford to have the child's picture taken because you'd have to pay somebody to do that because you don't have a camera.
Right, of course. And I'm sure those cameras weren't cheap because they were probably the kind that you got under the curtain and you like had the thing you held in your hand and it would right? Am I right on this? No?
Yes.
What kind of camera did they have back in 1912? I don't know. Anyway, don't come for me if I don't know. Don't come for me because I don't know what kind of camera. Anyway, so a New Orleans newspaper, they didn't say NOLA. I don't even know when NOLA was founded, but that's exactly what I was talking about. But it was the handheld crank one that came out. It's portable. But anyway,
nevertheless, they were too expensive if you're dirt poor to own, much less be able to pay somebody to take one.
Yes, right. That was my point. Thank you for having my back. So, a New Orleans news. I'm like our producer off mic over here is poo-pooing all this. Doesn't matter. Anyway, a New Orleans newspaper paid for Julia.
Well, he did clear an embassy, so I guess he feels like he can.
So he knows about cameras. Okay, right. Okay, that's a stretch, but okay. Stretch, during his like land nav classes.
I may not get another opportunity. I had to get it in.
He did. Take a drink. Everybody drink. So, a New Orleans newspaper paid for Julia's trip to Opelousas to identify the boy because this was like, so this was the 90-day fiance of the time, right? Can we just all agree on that? That this was the whole like, we're following like the day by day. What's reality TV? That's what I was thinking of the day because the newspapers were
in the newspaper. Yeah.
Yes. So, this was scoop. This was news. So they're like, yeah, let's see how this unfolds. We'll pay for her to go to Opelousas. She certainly didn't have the means. So she, I'm sure, jumped at the chance to go find her boy. So here's what they did. And this is so sketchy. Sketchy is probably not the right word, but this is so wrong. They set it up so she gets to Opelousas. She gets there, and so they decide that what they're going to do is a kind of a lineup, like they do of like Usual Suspects.
Yep.
So they have 5 boys. Bobby's one. Alonzo's one of them, and they're 5 in total, and they're gonna parade them out and let her see them and see if she can identify which one is hers, which is so this is just disgusting to me. It's really just, this one got under my skin. And so because Percy was there and him and all his people of influence that surrounded him, they were coordinating all this. They were the ones that put this on, their idea. They control the whole operation. So, these boys come out, and then one comes out and he's crying, and she actually asks, "Is this the boy that you found?" And they wouldn't tell her. So Julia didn't know for sure if Bruce was hers. Well, let me get this straight. The Dunbars thought was Bobby, but she was claiming it was Bruce. But when she'd asked about the boy that was crying, and they wouldn't tell her because she asked, "Is this the boy that you found?" And then so she didn't know for sure. She was upset. She was crying. And so she begged for another chance. She's like, "Can you please give me another chance?" And they said, "Okay, well, we'll come back the next day and we'll try this again." So they allowed her the next day to see Bobby. And then she undressed him. And she said that was her son. But also the newspapers had just ran with the story that she said the day before. She didn't know that was her. So the newspapers took that and ran with it and said that she doesn't know her son. She wouldn't know her son. She doesn't care about her children. She just has them and leaves them. Like I said, they called her a coarse woman. She worked in the field. She had dirty bare feet and coarse hands. They called her illiterate. They just really painted her in a very not flattering light. And so anyway, so back to Bobby. I guess I should say this. So after she gets ridiculed in the newspaper and treated really harshly, she doesn't have any money. She doesn't have any money for an attorney to fight this or to even stay, actually. So she goes back to North Carolina. And then so Percy and Leslie, they take Bobby, they take him back to Opelousas, and they start living their life. But they also have a trial. They go to court over this. And it takes a couple of years, but the court finds that Bobby is actually Bobby Dunbar. That's the Dunbar's son, Bobby. And Bobby had said things like, "A big man took me from the lake that day. Another little boy fell off the wagon and died." Like that. He was saying like all kind of crazy things.
So that was the thing. I think, wasn't it when, as a young adult, he was interviewed about the kidnapping, and he mentioned another boy being on the wagon with him and Walter.
Yes. And then also that he had shoved somebody in a stump. Yeah.
What?
Right. He was saying all these crazy claims. So, I'm not sure where to land on that, but just wanted to point some of those out. So back to William Walters, who's in jail and convicted of kidnapping. They actually find him guilty. So he's found guilty of kidnapping. But he appeals it. It goes on appeal, and Louisiana Supreme Court, they rule for a retrial. So then it goes back down to the courts, and they say, you know what, the first trial costs so much money, we can't afford this. So they actually drop the charges. So he is free. They let him go. He's released. And then Julia, she ends up moving to Poplarville, Mississippi. She moves from North Carolina to Poplarville because while she was there for trial, the people of Poplarville, Mississippi really took her in, and they remembered the boy with Walters, and this was the mother of the son that they had cared for, like you said, had bathed, and they had died, and so they took her in, that's pretty interesting because here's a woman from North Carolina who has it really rough over there. No money, she's a sharecropper working out in the field. And then it takes her moving out of North Carolina. She moves to Mississippi, and really they just don't really judge her or anything like that. They just take her in and get to know her, so much so that she feels comfortable moving there. And like I said, Bobby went off to live with the Dunbars and grew up as Bobby Dunbar. And then, so things go on. But then 5 years after the courts rule that Bobby is the Dunbar son, Percy and Leslie actually get a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
They actually divorce. This is 5 years later, which is really sad. The aftermath of this family is pretty sad. Percy actually beat and stabbed the man. And Leslie divorces and leaves her sons with Percy, and she moves to New Orleans.
Yeah, that bothered me a lot.
Right. So some said that maybe that was why she kind of knew that this was her son, not her son.
On some level.
So that might have been easier for her to just say, my husband's crazy, and I'm moving to New Orleans. Now, Alonzo was her, so that was kind of sad. But, that might be kind of, I don't know what you can read into that, but that's what happened. So then years later, so Margaret Dunbar Cutright, who's the author of A Case for Solomon, the book I mentioned earlier, she's actually the granddaughter of Bobby Dunbar, and she lost her brother. And so her father comes to her with this whole file. Actually, she explains that this had been, everybody in the family knew this, that they had talked about how Bobby was kidnapped from the lake that day, and that they found him in Mississippi and they brought him back. And so they just always talked about that story. And then so her father comes to her after she lost her brother and said, here's a project for you to work on. And it was just thousands of newspaper articles. And so she just totally submersed herself in this whole story, looking into it. And of course, she said nothing was in order. And as we explained, some accounts said one thing, some said the other. So she had that project of actually untangling that whole ball of knots, And so, which is how, she came to write the book. But she would pore over other articles. That she had, at one point, her husband had bought her a membership to the Library of Congress, and she just spent hours and hours researching this. And so it came up. There's also a reporter involved, and at one point the idea came about was, would the family be willing to take a DNA test? Just put this to bed. Let's find out. Let's take a DNA test. And so she said she'd only do it if she'd get everybody's family members on, all the family members on board. If they agreed to it, in which they did. And so they later said that the reason why they agreed to it was because they just knew that was their grandfather, her grandfather, her dad's father, that Bobby Dunbar was a Dunbar, and they were just going to find this out, and that was going to be it. And so they actually took two different lines. They even tested Alonzo's line because he was the actual, there was no doubt he was the family. He was Alonzo. So they had this DNA taken. And so it comes back, and she gets the results, and she's even claimed in one of her interviews that the lab technician just blurted it out over the phone, like, it's not a match, thinking, she's like, she must have thought it was some kind of
paternity.
Yes, a paternity test, because she said she didn't even know. She's like, she didn't even realize the impact of what that was. And essentially what happened was it tore this family apart, because like I said, they agreed because they didn't even think it wouldn't even be Bruce Anderson, that it was going to be Bobby Dunbar, but they were all shocked and torn apart. They even blamed her for tearing the family apart on this, which is sad, because at that point it's like, well, who am I? who is my family?
Well, because it's collateral. You've got the Dunbars, you've got the Bruce Andersons, you've got
Walters,
you've got I think I called him Walter earlier, Mr. William Walters. You've got all of these families that are impacted, and there's this collateral. I say collateral damage, but it's really collateral. I mean, it's collateral emotional damage.
Right, absolutely, certainly. So, that you mentioned the Andersons, and you mentioned that it was all these families. So the Andersons, their version of the story was that their Bruce was kidnapped. That's what their family had always said. Because the Dunbars, they had their version of what happened, and then the Andersons, they had always told the story that their Bruce was kidnapped and that they changed his name. So Julia actually, like I said, she moved to Poplarville, but she ended up being a nurse and a midwife. The newspapers had once called her illiterate, but her family members recall her reading to them. They said she had founded a church. She was very, very involved in their church. And
well, didn't she go on to have like 8 more kids?
She did. She got married and she had seven more children. They had pointed out that they were very poor because when her mother died back in North Carolina, in order for her to go back for her mother's funeral, they had to actually sell the family mule. So they were really they were pretty poor, which because they pointed out they never did go to Opelousas to even try to look for him, even when they were older. They said they were pretty intimidated of the Dunbar name. That Dunbar was on every building in Opelousas, and they just didn't. I certainly can understand that, but I thought this is pretty interesting. So, one of Julia's son, her 2 youngest, and these are the interviews on This American Life, Hollis and Jewel. And so Hollis told a story that he remembered an account when he was in his 20s. He said it was around 1944. He was working at an ice plant in Poplarville, and a man came in and he started small talk, and he said his name was Bobby Dunbar, but a customer came in and he had to go tend to the customer. And then when he came back, they made a little bit more small talk. Another customer came in, and by the time he came back, the man was gone. So that was his recount. And then also Jewel, Hollis' sister, Julia's daughter, she remembered when she worked at a service station that a man came in and he drank coffee and just asked her all these questions. Just sat there drinking coffee and asking her questions, and she thinks that was Bobby that came in there checking on her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so Margaret had told these stories to her side of the family. And so Gerald was Bobby's youngest son. He remembered when his family drove up to Cincinnati, Ohio for her brother's wedding when he was around 13, and this was in the 60s. So they drove through Mississippi, and he remembers his dad saying, "This is where they came to pick me up from. Should I stop?" And so his wife said, "If you think you should." And so he did. He went in and he stayed about 30 minutes and then got back in the car and went home.
Oh.
Yeah, so this just stayed with all the families because it affected all of them. So especially those 2. But like you said, affected all these families. So the Walters, when they found out about the DNA, the Walters were the ones who were totally relieved because that totally exonerated William, certainly in their eyes. And then the Andersons, they were validated because that was the Bruce that they knew that was kidnapped or taken, and his name was changed. And it was also interesting to know that the Andersons started calling him Bobby, because I get when he grew up, that was his name.
Yeah. And
then, but it was the Dunbars that actually ripped them apart, which is sad because this story doesn't have like a overall happy ending for everybody. There's closure, but doesn't necessarily make it happy.
No, it doesn't, because at the end of the day, there's still a little boy that went missing, and no one knows no one knows what happened to him.
That's right. And I've told this story so many times because that's what I do when I get involved in a story. I tell everyone around me that is even willing to listen, and even when they're not, I just tell them anyway. And that's what everybody ends with is, what happened to Bobby?
Right.
Because you're right. Like, this is a fascinating story, but then at the end, there's a little boy that's missing. And
that got eclipsed by the whole kidnapping and rehoming, and that got eclipsed by all the Dunbar drama with Percy and the mom leaving, and then years later, after most of the family is dead and gone, then it's revealed that actually was not
right. They didn't.
Bobby Dunbar.
That's right, and you're totally right that it got eclipsed because they just stopped the search. And then he was never recovered. So I think that he fell into the Swayze Lake, and I think an alligator ate him.
Yeah, I think, whether it was an alligator or any other, swamp
predation
dwelling, I feel like he died there. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, I do too. Because, they didn't, bobcats, I'm sure. I don't even know, like, which large cats are on Louisiana, panthers or anything. I don't know anything.
Bears,
Yeah, that's true. The black bear are all over Louisiana, especially in that area. But I feel like that you would have seen, like, the hat. They would have, and this is what they thought
trace.
too. Hat or some clothes. With that, that's why I think, he fell into the water, and he was eaten by an alligator. I really do feel like that.
And hopefully, this is terrible to say. Well, I shouldn't even say this, but hopefully, if that did happen, like he had already gone before he got eaten. That's a horrible way to go.
It is.
There's no good way to go in this scenario, but
yeah,
I don't know. It was very heavy, and I was not expecting that. Like, when you first told me about Bobby Dunbar, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I think we should cover that. But I didn't realize going into it just how heavy it would be. And so clearly, I believe that this is a story worth retelling.
Yes, absolutely. So, even as old as it is. It is very prolific all over YouTube. Lots of podcasts have covered it. There's no way we weren't going to cover this one. Just being in just the location and geographic location that it is. But I do highly recommend, at the very least, go back and listen to This American Life, the audio with the interviews.
Yeah, that one is absolutely worth the listen. I haven't read the book, but I do take your word for it.
Yeah, and the book is A Case for Solomon by Margaret Dunbar, Wright, and Tal McPhinia. And that's it. That's what we have. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Until next time.
And thanks for not giving up on us. You can find us on Twitter at SoDiscoPC. You can email us at southerndiscomfortpodcast@gmail.com if you have any listener suggestions. You're tired of hearing from this area and you'd like us to branch out, which we promise we will do. We're also Instagram at SouthernDiscomfortPC and Podbean, SouthernDiscomfort@podbean.com. Good night, everybody.
God dang it, Bobby. 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 God dang it. God dang it, Bobby.
I tried really.
God dang it, Bobby. God dang it, Bobby.
How long were you thinking about that? Oh,
God dang it.
Oh my God. We did so good. I have an hour of material. Okay. Somebody had to say it, right? All right. Let's plow through this.
You've been listening to Southern Discomfort with April and Christine. As you can tell, this is one of the most unique podcasts on the internet. So we want you to be able to reach out to us. Send emails to southerndiscomfortpodcast@gmail.com, on Facebook at Southern Discomfort Podcast, and on Instagram at Southern Discomfort PC. And for shows, visit southerndiscomfort.podbean.com. And this podcast can be found anywhere you get your podcasts. Till next time, keep one eye open because you never know what you might see. This is Southern Discomfort, signing off.